for spiritual truth. So excited about it. Of course, having my position, I often don't get to read the books when they're actually in this form. I often don't, only get to read them in, piles of paper in advance. And so going back to it in order to prepare for the launch tonight, I really enjoyed picking up the actual book on the weekend and reading through it again. And I have to say, I'm very, impressed with the writing and the way the whole thing turned out. And it just reminds me, and this is the second book that we've done with Adrian, so know this, but he's such a good writer, and he takes this topic that you might think is a little bit out of your reach and turns it into something that's so readable and enjoyable. And that really struck me reading it again in the actual finished book in the last few days. So I hope you get the chance to get your hands on the book and go through it and read it, because it's a great follow-up. If you've read the first book, which I'm assuming many of you have, because if you're here, you're probably pretty good friends with Adrian. But it's such a great follow-up from that, picking up where that last book left off and going deeper into Adrian's experiences with these knowing events that have happened in his life, and sort of exploring that. And so we're going to just sort of maybe jump right in and start talk to Adrian about curiousness about this book, and maybe Adrian, you could speak about when you got the initial idea to write this book.
Okay. Can everybody hear me out there? I hope so. With Terrilee, it is funny. With the book, when it was through the editing process, I had so many experiences, I guess you would want to say that we couldn't, it was too long. There would have been, there was too many. So the editor actually was tasked with cutting at least half of the experiences out. So this is one of the ones that I had touched on in the draft, because it had stood out for me. So I got the idea actually to write this when I was in my late teens, and I would have been at my childhood church. I know it was in my teens because I was there by myself. I'd gone so I'd be 16 or 17. And every time when I went to the church, the people that would know South Rustico Church, I would sit on the right-hand side as you come in, and there was a smaller seats, and it overlooked Rustico Bay. So I would get a window seat, and I would look out at the water and pay no attention to what was going on the altar. That was just my nature. And so I was looking out at the water, and all of a sudden I came to the section of the Mass that I think they call Prayer for the Faithful, or Prayer of the Faithful. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that section where they actually offer prayers. And at this point, the priest said, we are now going to pray for people who will write about God. And I had felt like a calling that said to me that someday I will do that. And so the idea was planted that long ago. So that's 40 years ago.
My mouse stopped to work there. So that's kind of unbelievable, because it sort of seems to be, before you started to have a lot of these experiences. But it was just more of a general writing about God, but it wasn't about writing these particular spiritual journeys.
No, the message was very clear, was to write about spirituality and basically what it meant to me as opposed to organized religion. And so I have been driven by that desire for years.
So is it something that you've been kind of the wording of it formulating in your head for years, or like because the actual experiences happened later?
Right.
How, I don't know, I'm just curious about that thinking process that you would have had then.
Well, I'd say it would have changed over the years. I'm confused here with do I come up on the screen? Can people see me when I'm talking?
Yes.
Yeah, you go full screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. So Terrilee, yeah, it kind of changed because I guess like anything else, we mature, and as we mature and developed, or we kind of do things differently.
Mhm.
And I'm distracted here because for some reason Gloria is on my screen, and
So if you want to change it, up in the right hand corner, it will say there's different view options. You can change it to gallery view or
Okay.
speaker view.
I'm fine there now. Yeah. Instead I was
So if you have,
answering your question, I couldn't see it, so it was it was a little distracting. So yes, so I changed it over the years, and I guess the other thing that influenced me was I'm an avid reader, so I would read and I would see different styles of writing and different ways really appealed to me. So then I would say, okay, I really like. So I was kind of intrigued by your introduction, because one of the things that kind of really stood out to me as I would read different books, and that is the way some people told their story, more almost like storytelling. There was a flow to it as a story, as opposed to as the just giving the event, and I was very drawn to that. Yeah, I was very to that stuff.
yeah, that's interesting, because I was wondering where that came from, because I know you have you taught literature, and
Yes.
you have the background that way, but
Always loved.
you really have, yeah, you have a great voice, like a great storytelling voice, which is not always, especially in a nonfiction kind of setting,
Right.
not always there.
So this summer, when I did some writing for CBC on their website, it was really. It was a battle by times, because they would say to me, and I'm sure my brother can relate to this, they'd say, "This is journalism, we need the 5 W's." And they would say, "But you're telling story, or they'd say you're poetic," and it kind of didn't flow for what they were used to. They liked it, but there was a bit of a struggle. Yeah, they were looking for the 5 W's, they said.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's so much more enjoyable to read, and I find that and it's like finding this. It was like this in Finding Forgiveness. It's just like you pick it up, and then the next thing you know, you're halfway through it, because the voice and the storytelling is very strong. So I guess there's so many stories of interesting events in your life where, for those of you who don't know, I mean, Adrian went through these experiences where suddenly he had these sense of knowing, like he knew what was going to happen before it happened, and at first he just kind of seemed to just thought they were coincidences, or just sort of took note but didn't pay too much attention to it. But then it started to get deeper than that.
And the only, I guess one thing I maybe would clarify that, Terrilee, lots of times I didn't know it before, I knew it simultaneously. So a lot of the big events, that was the case. It's like intuition. I knew it when it was happening. It wasn't that I predicted it. Yeah, except there was
right.
There was a few incidents, like dreams, that did predict stuff that did happen for sure. But when I'm thinking of the big events, it was more of a knowing or awareness that this is what's happening.
And so you talk about a number of those in the book, and the one that sort of sticks out for me. I mean, there's a number of them that do, but and I guess because you recorded it and you have it all written down, what happened was when your mother got sick, right? So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You maybe talk about that for a minute.
Well, I guess that would be a prime example of, I think they call it telesomatic communication, where I didn't predict that my mom was sick, but I definitely knew it at the exact moment. And why I can say the exact moment, because I was in Guyana at the time, and it was, I think it's 3,000 kilometers from home type of thing, due south. And then I had gone to bed, and in the middle of the night, it was so clear, the experience that I had was so clear that I grabbed my journal and I documented it right then, and I wrote down the time. And then when I came back home, a couple of weeks later, when Mom had come to see me, and that's the first time that she was sharing her illness, I had said to her, it just hit me. I kind of forgot about it because I had another couple of weeks in Guyana after the event. Plus, when I came home, I really did go into a depression when I came home from Guyana. It was just overwhelming. And my mom had given me a bit of grace. She didn't want to lay anything kind of else on me. So that day she came down to tell me. I was actually living at my good friend Marcel's place in South Rustico. And she came in and into the kitchen, and she told me what had happened. And it just like the awareness came back. And I said to Mom, I said, Mom, do you know when this happened? And she said, all I can tell you is that the pain, the exact time that I knew was, she said, like 5:20 in the morning or whatever time it was. And with the time change, it was identical to when I was in Guyana. Yeah.
And so you had written that down, and you were able to
Yes, I had it written down. So I ran upstairs to find my journal, and it was probably the worst thing I could have done because I was so excited about the experience, and my mom was terrified. And I didn't think of it like that. I thought I was saying to her, look, Mom, look how connected we are. And she interpreted it as, look how sick I am. Because you wouldn't have felt it in Guyana if it wasn't serious.
So that was what it was. I was wondering why she was so concerned about that, and why that.
Well, she didn't like superstition, and it's funny. This is where I guess my brother could pop in too and say stuff like that, but it was not in her nature. She didn't like that kind of stuff, and it was a battle between us because she was probably the person I was most connected to, but most different when it came to that aspect. And I resented the fact that anything that happened within the confines of religion, organized religion, she would accept. She would accept, whether you talked about miracles or whether you talked about blessings or whether you talked about healings. She had tremendous faith. But when I would have my experience, she took it as like it was superstitious or whatever. She did not like it at all. Yeah.
There is a weird sort of, I don't want to say hypocrisy, but
yeah, it was a battle between us right up until really maybe her last couple of years of her life. Yeah, it just it was a kind of a clash. Never a major clash, just a difference of opinion. Yeah.
And so you document a number of these incredible experiences in your book, and is it limited to what's in the book, or is it something that happens to you like regularly, or are there other experiences that you've had that were like this?
Oh, this happens to me right to the point that I document them on a regular basis. And I actually, through my counseling, I encourage people to do the same, because I believe intuition is one of those things that the more you honor it, the more you kind of respect it, the stronger it gets. And I did have one experience that I didn't share in the book, and I didn't share because the editor, and I really respected where she was coming from. I'll share kind of the experience, but she was concerned about how another family might have felt reading it, and I really I get that. But talking here today with I know everybody who's online here, basically. I feel a little bit more comfortable. But I did have one experience. I'll just briefly outline it. When I was studying at UNB, and I was doing my master's over there, and I had come home for a weekend. And I don't know if people are familiar with New Brunswick, but after you leave Moncton area, there's a shortcut that we used to, I can't even think of the names of it. It's not the best road, but it cuts off a fair bit of the distance to Fredericton. And I was driving back on a Sunday evening, it was very dark. I get late, and as I drove onto the road, I was quite a ways in it. I had this really strange sensation. There was a deer on the side of the road, and the deer just looked at me very, very intensely. It's hard to explain these experiences, but it was like I connected with this deer. I was looking at the deer. The deer was off to the side of the road. There was other deers out there, but there was this one in particular very close to the road, and I had a very strong awareness that something really important was happening. So I slowed down. I drove to Fredericton. I hardly slept that night. I was really troubled by it. I couldn't explain. I didn't know what had happened. So then Monday morning, I went up and I went to class. And when I walked into class, one of my classmates, one of the students, said to me, she said, "Adrian, we're so glad to see you. We said we were just talking about you." And I had walked to class, and I was kind of tired. I said, "Why would you be talking about me?" And she said, "Weren't you home on the weekend?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I came." And she said, "Did you come back last night?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Did you take the shortcut?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "There was a woman killed on that road, and she had hit a deer, and the road was blocked." So why the editor very respectfully thought, because I can't explain that stuff, why did I get a message that somebody else died from it? And so that's one of the ones I have struggles with, and I didn't know how to put that in print. But sometimes it's that big of an experience.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah, I'm taking a risk sharing it out here, but I think I need people to kind of get an idea of how powerful some of these experiences are, and it's kind of hard to just share them openly all the time. Yeah, but I have never shared that with anyone before.
Wow. And so there was a connection too with this deer.
Yes.
And do you have these kind of that similar kind of connections with other people that you might not know, or
oh yeah,
people that you connect with more than others?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it's quite clear. I said that my mother was the person I had the strongest one with, and then I was married for 14 years together with Cheryl, and I had very strong connection with Cheryl. No question. We were that was one of the things that really kind of drew me to her is when we first met her, and then recently I had beautiful experience with another friend when she had wanted some information about my counseling, and when she called, it was one of the strong. I've never had experience like that. When I heard her voice, I knew I was connected to her, and she was one of my closest friends. Yeah.
Wow. So who are you most connected to?
Right at this moment?
Yeah.
In my life?
Mm-hmm.
Almost my dog Nellie. I'm very connected with I have very strong friendships. I'm really connected with my brother. I have very good close relationship with my cousin Karen, that's down in the States, and even though I don't get to see her a whole lot, my cousin Marcel, I would say, is my best friend, and I have a very special connection with the woman Karen that I mentioned about it on the phone call. She's into a lot of the same spiritual interests, and we relate on another level for sure. Yeah. Beautiful.
So, can I share something kind of weird about those sort of connections? Something kind of woo-woo. But
yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Adrian was a teacher back when I was in high school. You were pretty new to teaching.
Yeah, it was right. Yeah, fresh out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so he wasn't my teacher, but I knew him, seemed like I knew you well because you were teachers, friends of mine and stuff. You kicked my brother out of your class.
I remember that.
But anyway, I always felt back then that it wasn't like a, any sort of even friendship connection or whatever, but I always felt there was a sort of a connection, and maybe that there would be something that would come out of it later on, like that. I don't know what it was, but back in high school, I felt like that, and now I know why, because
Yeah.
now we're working together on books. So it wasn't any like sort of real deep, like kind of the kind of thing you're talking about. But I remember feeling back then, okay, there's a reason I know this person, like
Yeah.
that happens.
That's beautiful, and that's exactly what I mean about it. It's just a knowing. You just know it. It's same as, and you talked about connections there. I write about it in the book, but when I I was godfather for little Chantel, and that was an experience that I, like, at that moment I knew I was connected for life. It's just a connection. It's there. Yeah, and she's just a child. She could have went one way, I could have went the other, but I just, and now we're extremely, we're still extremely close. Yeah.
And time goes by quickly when we're talking about this stuff. It's very interesting. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the writing and how your typical writing process works. I mean, you talked a little bit about this, about how you like to read lots of other books on, and how you
Yeah.
sort of research as to how those writers tell their stories. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
But the main thing for me is I get most of my ideas through when I'm walking. There's no question that is my main source. Especially if I'm walking in nature, walking by the beach, I guess would be the main thing. And then in the fall, and that maybe walking more in the woods. So I tend to kind of get my ideas, try to wrestle, kind of write it in my head, and then when I come home, I don't do well with distractions. So I always have a place where I'm living, whatever part of the house that I have, that's a set place. And I then try to put the ideas down fairly quickly, but I always walk first. I always walk and kind of get the ideas. And then I'm very influenced by certain, writing styles. Now I'm comfortable with my own, but it's a process. So over the years, it was a matter of also reading other works and seeing what really appealed to me and what did I feel I connected with. Yeah.
And so do you do that every day, or is it like once a week, or what's kind of the timing?
Yeah, no, it's during COVID, it was definitely every day for sure. When I was writing the last two books, I wouldn't say it was every day because I was also there was two factors. One is I had a very busy job when I was at the school board that was very demanding. Writing was relaxing, but I also felt, sometimes it just, I had to be in the right mind frame, kind of relaxing to write. Now that I'm retired, I would say I write every day. Yeah. And the other thing was too, for a number of years, my health was so bad, and I just didn't have the energy to. I suffered from severe headaches, and even mood swings like that really affect. So I would never write at those times because I didn't feel I was doing it justice. Yeah. But now that health is very good, and retired, I write almost every day.
Right. So as time moves on here, maybe what we can do is switch over to, you could do a little reading. Do you have a passage that you might want to be interested in sharing with the group?
Well, I thought you might. So I did pick a couple here. Don't think I'm the greatest reader, but I will. I'll try one little piece here.
Maybe something that gives a good flavor of the book.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll just look which one I'll go with here. Okay, I'll go with this first one.
Can you tell us what page you're on?
Sure. Thank you. I'm on page 7. Actually, it's part 1. Okay. So So I'm writing here about when Terrilee asked me at the first, when did I get the idea to write the book? I was a teenager. I was like 16 or 17. But what I'm referring to here is the first time I became aware that there was more to this world than the physical world. So it begins. The first time God spoke to me, I was 8 years old, and I was standing alone in the living room of my childhood home, looking out through my favorite window, gazing out upon nature. It was like time stood still. On that spring morning in Oysterbay Bridge, the experience was brief and an insight or knowledge was given. I felt as if I was under the influence of a higher power or some divine source of energy. So at that young age, I could only call it God, for I knew of no other name. I knew this voice was completely trustworthy and was there to look after me. The voice told me that the religious stories that the church had taught me, reinforced by my parents and my Catholic classes, were not true. Catechism classes, were not true. Consider the situation. I was a mere child who had been raised in a traditional Catholic family. My father had even studied to become a priest. Yet this voice told me that the historical teachings extolled by the Roman Catholic Church were false, that the religious stories I had been taught by the church, my parents, my classes, were not the truth. This knowledge, this entire experience was totally foreign to my culture, to my upbringing, and to my childhood beliefs. The voice, however, did not say that God did not exist. The message had an even deeper spiritual truth. I had the feeling that this voice was really saying that she or he did not want me to live my life in a lie, not ever. I was encouraged to question. I was never to accept anyone's belief systems without thinking for myself. I was encouraged to seek my own truth, to question. And I picked that passage because it was my first awareness, I guess, that, like I said, that there was more to life than the physical. And the other part was when I say about why it was so important, the question, because it was the period leading up to that. I was raised in a very traditional family, like religious family, and my brother was an altar boy, and it was the first time I took a stand. I refused to be an altar boy, and I thought of that this week after it came back to me for some reason. It was quite an experience because. So the rest of the boys in the class had gone to be altar boys, and there was this moment where they had actually left to go to the church, and a nun had kept. I think there was four of us that weren't going to be altar boys, and she was so disappointed in me. Like, disappointed is not the right word. She was. I know she was almost like wanting to shame me into saying, like, your father studied to be a priest, your parents are involved in the church, your brother's an altar boy. Why wouldn't you? And I couldn't do it. I had to live my truth, and it was ingrained into me at such a young age to say, no, you got to live your truth. And so that's why I picked that passage.
That's great. So let's open it up now. What do you think? We can let people ask questions.
Sure.
Does anybody out there have some questions? If you do, you can so if you click on the participants tab on the bottom, that'll bring up a list. And right there, you can raise your hand. At the bottom of that, there's a little thing where you can raise your hand to ask a question, or you can ask a question in the chat. If anybody has any questions, I can start a little bit more. I mean, we've been asked. Oh, Karen's got a question. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, just wondering, Adrian, because I'd never heard that before, that passage that you just read. And I'm just wondering if you could share how that experience impacted you, because that's a pretty big event in a young child's life. That's pretty monumental. I mean, did you feel the need to talk to people about it, or did you just internalize it all?
Totally internalized it, Karen. The issue and I do explain it further in the book, it was also, so that event was very important because it was the first time I had questioned religion, but it was also the first time I questioned mental health. So I didn't tell anyone because I already knew at the age of 8 that I could be perceived as being totally crazy and, risk of being rejected and not being accepted, fears of conformity. So it was, I definitely internalized it. I never told a soul, but it left such a mark on me. And I do believe it's, again, can't explain where the, but it was Karen. It was almost like it was my introduction to meditation, because I was, my brother would know what I'm talking about at the part of the house, but I would literally go and stand still and stare out at nature. And that's when I would get, and this is when I got this message. So I felt the message just came to me, and it was only came to me. So but the main reason, I guess, to be totally honest, I was really concerned about how I would be perceived by others. So I told nobody.
It's sad though, at that age to be so worried about how others perceive you, because you think about the lost opportunity that maybe you would have had to have discussed it with your parents and their individual spirituality, right? Because they had their own different approach to spirituality as well.
I definitely, Karen, I do consider it very sad. I do. I agree with that. I think it was, I can't rewrite it.
No.
You didn't know like that, but and then I do touch into, in the book, I do touch into it too, that I have very few regrets of life, but one regret would be that I didn't speak openly enough about this stuff. I think it could have benefited other people too. I think it might have encouraged other people to, to start to question, and also to normalize some of the experiences. Because I'm not the only one. One of the biggest feedbacks I got from the book already is that the number of people that have said they can relate to certain aspects of it, and they thought they were the only one having these experiences. And they said, wow, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. And one woman sent me a text. I don't know her very well, but she knows Hayden. And she said, I'm so pleased to read a book like this that I can relate to, but not only is it written by an Islander, it's written from somebody from Rustigo. So for her, it was like, this is great. It's just somebody from Rustigo, and so I like that.
That's great.
It's also kind of neat though that experience, that happened. You were like 8 years old or whatever, but then when you're a teenager, another 8 years later or whatever, you had this real calling to write about God and spirituality, and how those two, there's a little bit of a, I don't know, interesting sort of mix there, because you wanted it to be on your own terms in a way, right? Like not Catholic kind of dogmatic type of way or whatever.
No, and that was also part of the message too. The message was to differentiate between spirituality and religion, because I was convinced at a very young age that they were two different things.
But did you see that when you had that thought in the church when you were 16? Did you see it as a challenge, Adrian? It's like, okay, I'm going to write the spirituality that I feel, which needs to be heard, and it's not the doctrine that I've been raised in. Was it something that was it almost a combative type reaction that you had?
I don't like the competitive tone, so I would feel it felt more like a calling.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's exactly how it felt to me. It felt more like a calling, that being guided to do something. Yeah. Okay. I didn't feel like challenged or not. I think it was just understood it would happen. It's just when it would happen. Yeah. I'm 58 years old. It's hard to believe, like this. It's 50 years later, and I'm just kind of telling this stuff for the first time. And I've been living with this for 50 years. So it's. I'm wondering how I'm gonna feel tomorrow.
Is there anyone else who has a question? I know I have lots, so. Yes, go ahead, Hayden.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the story of Mom's reaction to Adrian's premonition, intuition about her health when he was in Guyana and she was back home on PEI. And I think a lot of it has obviously had to do with her upbringing in a Catholic home. And I think she saw intuition, that sort of thing, as more belonging to the supernatural than, her faith. And I think it just scared her. And because I remember the story, our father apparently could read tea leaves. And one day he read the tea leaves, it was on the future of this young woman who lived in the area, told her basically who she was going to marry and where she would live. And Mom forbid him from ever doing that again because it pretty much came to fruition. So I think that, anyway, that that story of Adrian being in Guyana and having that moment immediately brought me back to that story of Dad and the tea leaves and Mom telling him he couldn't do it again. So
It's interesting after having read the first book, it seems like your father reading tea leaves it's not the right fit in my mind.
yeah, I know.
But it is funny what I think what Hayden's kind of alluding to, that appreciation for the supernatural or the spiritual, whatever. It played out very differently in our parents' lives. Like the Smith side of the family, the Irish side, was very open to supernatural. Wouldn't you say, Hayden?
Oh yes.
Yeah, they were
very much so.
Yeah, very open.
Yeah.
And whereas my mom's view of religion was very traditional, for sure.
It's very much the French-Irish type dichotomy, if you will, right? Because it's the Catholic Church, the French doctrine is very, very traditional, and I can see it, having the French-Irish background myself, as you know, just completely different. I'd say a level of openness and receptivity across the two sides of the family.
As far as Mom was concerned, only God and saints could have these moments of foresight and whatever, whereas, the Irish just felt, it was pretty much commonplace with everyone, in the community of Fort Augustus and that where Dad grew up. So very much part of their every daily lives back then. I don't know what it's like now. But.
That sort of makes a little bit more sense to me.
Yeah.
When you think of it that way, for sure. Any other questions, comments?
I have just a comment.
Hi, Donna.
Great.
Hi. Just something that I really liked about the book is it made me wonder after I read it if I was more in tune with what was happening, lived more in the moment, got out in nature more. Like, it made me wonder if I'm missing some messages, do you know what I mean? And it really made me want to do those things, like get out in nature more, pay more attention, and not be so, busy with the day-to-day, jumping from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder how many of us are missing some of the messages where someone like yourself, who is, you're more in tune, you're in the moment, kind of, that's what made me think, as I read the book.
Yeah, I think Donna, I feel the majority of people are missing them. I think there's lots of experiences that people are having. We're just not aware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is that matter of kind of I go back to like being 8. I said, I'm very aware of that, but that first time I had that experience is not by accident, that I was in almost a meditative state looking out at nature. I was totally present, and I just had that habit as a child, which it wasn't very common, I guess, but I would do that. It drove my mother crazy. She'd say, "Why are you looking out? What are you looking at?" You know, and but I think it was like kind of an introduction to meditation, and I loved being present. And as a kid, I spent so much time with my animals and just being outside. Yeah, really not having a whole lot to do, just enjoying the moment. And I walk every day. I'm in nature every day. I missed one day this year. Yeah.
Wow.
And they now they call that mindfulness. You know,
Yes.
but back then there was sort of like it was an ADD-ness or something, you know, like it wasn't the same kind of appreciation for it as there is now. And sort of being more present, noticing what's happening to you, what's happening around you, what's happening, your reactions on other people, that kind of thing.
Terribly, but that's one of what Donna just shared. It was so inspiring for me, because that's whole part of writing the book like that. You hope it encourages people to to do that too, to become more mindful, become more aware, and and it goes back to that when I'm doing counseling with people. I really try to encourage people to work on that. I find mindfulness helps. It makes for just a healthier, happier life. And one of the things that I think does it is journaling. I ask people to actually document the experiences, because that to me gives another level of ownership. If you write about it and you put it down in print, that means somebody else could pick it up. And then it becomes more ingrained. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm.
And it kind of like ingrained, but in it validates it in a way.
Yes,
like
exactly.
your experiences.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is it your thought that you come across this more often in a group of people that you would be counseling than in the general population?
Olive, I can't say that. So I think a lot of it comes back to the willingness to share.
Okay.
So if I'm in a counseling situation, counseling is a very intimate, process. So if I'm in that kind of situation, though, I find those people are more likely to share, but it's also confidential, right? I think they feel safer to share and stuff like that. People in the general public, I personally believe they probably do have the same amount of experiences. I just don't think there's an outlet for people to talk about. And that's what I've said. The biggest feedback that I'm getting from readers from this book compared to Finding Forgiveness is people that are saying, I can really relate. I've had an experience like that, or that's very similar to my upbringing, but I didn't know who I could talk to about it. And if you're raised in rural PEI in a very traditional, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, but those were the two main religions for us growing up, it just would have been encouraged. You would never encourage you're supposed to accept what was being taught. You weren't encouraged to actually question.
I mean, you wouldn't normally get that, like when you run into somebody at the grocery store.
No, exactly.
You wouldn't in that kind of situation, but you might now.
I hope
Your answer to this question might be different than a year from now. Right?
And I can remember a conversation in university where just one time we were sitting around having a few drinks, and I shared some, and I was amazed how interested people were, but nobody kind of shared, but it was kind of, they were interested in what I was saying, sort of thing like that. But,
I heard a lecture one time on this sort of a topic, and the speaker was claiming that probably as much as 20% of the population have such experiences.
Oh, I have no trouble believing that. Yeah.
So Adrian, when did you accept that these were, a normal part of your daily life, and that these weren't strange, and that you shouldn't question, how you were thinking about these, and find comfort in them rather than not?
I would say the turning point for me was after my father's death, where I got a message to go home, which I write about in Finding Forgiveness, where I was, heading the opposite direction, was heading to Kincora. And my mom was, I feel I should say our mom, since Hayden's there too, but our mom was going to go through Dad's belongings, and I got a message to go home. And that changed everything for me, because at that point, by me following my intuition or guidance, it's more than intuition, it was a message. But for me to follow that and trust that, it had such an impact on my mom's life. I was able to, in my eyes, protect her. Mm. So that changed it for me. At that point on, it was like, just follow it. Mm. Don't question, just follow it. And there's the bit of the irony. I didn't question, but all along, I'm still encouraging people to question. But that's where it changes for me. I don't, when I get a message like that, I don't question that. That's like, to me, it feels like divine intervention, and just listen to it, respect it. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of an irony, I guess. Yeah. But that was definitely the turning point for me. And I haven't stopped since. Yeah.
Adrian?
Yes.
I was just wondering, how do you think the telesomatic and the dreaming come together? Are they of one, or are they separate?
Is this Bruce asking the question?
No, it's Marcel.
Oh, Marcel, sorry. I there's no
picture.
Yeah. And I'm so visual that throws me off, so I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question again, Marcel?
No, I was just wondering if you think telesomatic incidents and dreaming come together.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think it's all connected, for sure. To me, the basic, it's all energy. It's right, just energy that we can't explain, and we can get the message. It can come and it can materialize in different ways. And telesomatic is one example of it, and I think dreams are another perfect example. I know personally you do too, Marcel. You have some very powerful dreams that do give messages, and anyway, to me, it's all energy. Yeah, it's just another way. I think those two are very connected. Intuition, telesomatic, dreams. Yeah, it's all coming from the same source.
Yes. Anyway, I want to say also that your book is written very well, and it brings out pretty ideas that are pretty complex, but it's an easy read for people, and that I guess goes to your storytelling, really. So.
Thank you. And I guess that was part of the kind of the struggle, because it isn't a light topic. Spirituality is not a light topic, but I wanted to make it. I guess it's readable, right? I wanted people to enjoy reading it, and then I felt that they would be more likely to engage in the book. Yeah.
Well, you did a great job. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
It is definitely very readable, and I think the way you weave in the sort of bibliographic information and stuff, it doesn't sound academic or complicated at all. It's just it's more like, oh, I was reading this book, and it just makes it sound like.
And those were the books that I studied so much at university and enjoyed university. But the books that I remember were books that were more like that had a feel of storytelling, where they, and so I wanted to try to recreate that experience.
What about any other questions?
Well, just wondering, Adrian, you're talking about books at university and what have you. I mean, how much have you delved into say other religions and their acceptance, if you will, of the type of spirituality and the messaging and the feelings and experiences you've had, and how they shaped kind of your reaction to it, how you handle it, how you think about it?
The religion without question, I've been most influenced by would be Buddhism. And I know lots of times that don't really consider it a religion, more as a way of life, I guess, or a way
exactly.
of living. Yeah. But no, without question, that is the religion I've been most influenced by and drawn to and have read about the most. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's the same. I do read a lot about Christianity too, and I believe there's lots of good literature out there who have kind of taken what I would call the teachings, the basic teachings of
Mm.
Jesus, if you want to, put it that way, rather than getting into like the dogma of it. And I think there's some beautiful literature out there. And I find I find those two religions really, there's a lot of similarity between the two of them when you get down to the fundamental principles. And so I think it's only natural that I would be drawn to both.
Mm. So would you recommend, is there something, in the readings that you've done that you'd recommend for people who, like myself, I'm scientific and my whole life has been science, to kind of explore, a sort of a good entry read into to considering this area?
Well, I have lots of books, but probably like why I'm having trouble pulling them out of the air is I've moved twice in the last year, and all my books are in storage. So the titles that I don't have them at my fingertips, sort of thing like that. But what I would rather do, Karen, is like send you a list.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
No,
a list of the ones that kind of appeal to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'd love that. Thank you.
I will do that for sure. I'll make a note of it.
Thank you.
I guess I'm wondering what, if any, at the end of this talk tonight, what would the messages you'd want to leave with people from your book and from the messages that you're putting out there?
Well, I guess I hope that it encourages people to live mindfully. I guess the biggest thing is that we all live our truth. I say in the book, I don't think we can all get to. We kind of have to respect where we are. We all have our own challenges. We all have our own life experiences. It's not a matter of just waking up one day and saying we're going to be spiritual. But I believe for me, that's what I needed to do to live my truth. I had to embrace that. So I guess whatever truth people have, I hope that they live it. I guess that's the biggest thing. And hopefully make a difference in somebody else's life along the way.
Write it down.
You write it down. Yeah, write it down and share it.
Any last questions before we start to wrap it up?
Can you hear me? Adrian, this is Michelle. You know that I get lots of knowings. I'm just wondering with your dreams, I'm just starting to actually remember a lot of my dreams. Do you keep a dream journal, and do you try to see them playing out in your life, and how do you figure them out?
Okay. Which Michelle is this? I know a couple of Michelles.
Blanchard.
Michelle Robbie?
Yes.
Hi, Michelle. I didn't know you were on there. Nice to hear there. I kept a dream journal since I was in university. I just probably right after I started keeping them because I was having such it's not nightly, but when I would have an experience and I knew it was going to have an impact, I knew there was a message in it. I started keeping a dream journal. Now what I do, Michelle, is I have my own ritual where I reflect every day. I haven't missed a day in probably 6 years where I write a spiritual reflection. And now instead of making keeping dreams separate, I just incorporate it into that. So if there was a really powerful dream the night before, that's probably what I write about the next morning. But I make sure I do. I think dreams are very telling, very important. I do record them.
Okay, thanks, Adrian.
Gloria had a question too, I believe.
Me?
Hi, Gloria.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question for you. When you spoke and told your story about when you were 8 and you knew your truth at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and all experiences that you've had where you've tapped into that spiritual piece of yourself, do you feel like that has always been connected to that truth that you
Yeah.
have lived your whole life?
Yeah, yeah, very much.
And do you feel that that truth that you have so done so well has enabled you to come to this point in your life where you can open yourself up to write? I haven't read your book yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
To being able to share those experiences.
Yeah, no, it all goes back. It goes right back to that kind of experience. And then I had several life events where I felt you never stop growing, right? We just keep evolving. And for me, I would hit a major challenge in my life or a major struggle, and I would find, okay, I'm telling my truth, but I'm not maybe embracing it. Like I had this faith, I had this belief, but the biggest thing for me, Gloria, was when I got sick the second time and I had a relapse and I was so sick. And I said, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing what the doctors asked. They told me I was a perfect patient. I was working, on my physical stuff. I was doing counseling. I was doing all the right, and I still wasn't, I just knew there was another level. And the part that was missing was the spirituality. And when I embraced that, and then I was allowed, when I was looking at all aspects of myself, then my health started to fully improve.
The other question that I have, and it's not really a question, but the sharing that you've done in your book will touch many people's lives and change a lot of the people. Do you think that?
I hope, yeah, I hope so. I hope that's the whole, I think the whole purpose of, I think that's the whole purpose of writing a memoir. You're trying to give a very intimate, tell an intimate part of your life, a period of your life, and you're hoping that it has some influence on other people. I go back to Maslow. I love his main point, but it's self-actualization, saying how can you be the best version of yourself, but it's self-actualization through self-transcendence. You have to help others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, telling your story will help others.
Well, I hope so.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you. That's the intention.
One of the things I think that spiritual books do is that when you read the books and you get the message, you get your own message out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Many people will probably get their own message out of what you have shared because they will have their own experiences.
Yeah, and that's Gloria. That's the main feedback I've been getting from this book. People have said that they have felt inspired. One of the nicest things that I've heard, I've had 5 people already write to me and say they feel inspired to tell their own story. It just kind of maybe gave them a little push. Some people, a good friend of mine who's on here tonight, I know she's writing her own story, and she said the same thing, that it's just a little, it's maybe a bit of validation to say to them, yeah, I can do this too.
I think that's the nice thing about your book, Adrian. I haven't read it, but I know that I've known you from way back and have not been really close with you, but I had experience when I met you for the first time. I knew you were a very spiritual person. I felt really connected to you, although I haven't been in contact with you. But was really quite excited when I saw your book in the buzz.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh, that looks like a good book. I got to get that one. Anyway, Adrian, thank you very much for sharing.
Well, thank you for coming here tonight, joining us.
Karen has another question.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Adrian, that writing a book is a journey, right? I mean, it's something that you think about for a long time, even before you're writing. You live it while you write it, and it's an experience in its own right. So I'm just kind of wondering how that experience of writing this and realizing that you were, finally sharing a really, critical, formative part of your life, your personal history. How did that change you when you knew that this was kind of exposing, so much about, the real Adrian, as you say, it's your truth. How did that whole evolution and that process, how did it change you?
So, well, it's probably been the biggest risk I think I've ever taken.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel there. And as I said into the book, why I knew I had to write is because I was scared to death of doing it. It really was. I had a much easier time writing about my issues with my father and trying to get to forgiveness. I found that even easier to write about, and some people can't relate to that. They'll say, "Oh God, that was painful part of your journey." But that was therapy. This process is almost like kind of reclaiming myself.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been so free.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a really amazing outcome of something like this, because it's not a given, right? You may have felt exposed, like weakened somehow, but to come out in that really positive way is really fantastic.
And I was even nervous about my friend Marcella texted me to wish me luck tonight, and I said to him earlier, it's as the lead up was coming, I was a little anxious about it, because everything's the next level of putting yourself out there, right?
Exposure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And when I wrote Find Forgiveness, not everybody liked that either. Not everybody was open. A lot of people thought I was sharing too much stuff, not respecting some people's privacy, but not everybody's entitled to their own opinion, right? But I'm a firm believer with family secrets, and this for me was, again, I talk about levels. This was the next level of growth for me, to say I had dealt with family secrets. Now it's to share all my secrets, in the sense of just be true to myself completely.
Adrian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm not used to this. One of the things that I learned about developing spiritually myself was that when I always tried to be in my own truth and be sincere. And that really enabled me to develop ethically, spiritually. And it sounds to me that you've gone way beyond that. And that your truth has really led you into an all new higher level. And it will just continue to get higher and higher because of who you are.
But I have to keep working at it, right?
Well, we all do.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
I actually had a very, I don't want to keep people too long, but I did have, Michelle had asked about dreams. And one of the very powerful dream, when I had started to write Find Forgiveness, I had this dream where I had gone into this town and I was searching for answers. And this man, he was Indian. He asked me kind of to follow him. Anyway, when we came to the top of a building. He took me up a flight of stairs. I got to the top of the building, and when I got to the top of the building, it wasn't finished. It was like going on a job site, a construction site, and they're building the house, but it wasn't finished. And I was kind of confused. I said, "Well, why did you take me here?" And he said, "Because," "you're still in the process of building yourself." And he said, "This is just one level." And
well, that's a beautiful dream, isn't it?
yeah, it was a bit, and I'm giving a very kind of cold notes of it, but yeah, it was a beautiful message to get. And it keeps people humble, which is very important.
Yes.
Okay, look, we shouldn't probably take up the rest of everybody's night, but it was really great for everybody to come out in the, come out, I guess, stay home and during the hurricane. And
we all survived.
Take
Teddy,
part.
Teddy kept us, we didn't lose our power. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. So far, so good.
And Nellie didn't ask to go out.
Yeah, my dog started to play with his toy at one point. I was like, mute, mute. I do want to, thank Adrian so much for sharing this story with us. This book, if you haven't bought it yet, haven't had a chance to read it yet, do yourself a favor. It's such a great book, and I also want to, thank Lori and Dan from the Bookmark for sponsoring and working with us on doing events, even though they're not the same as what we would have normally be doing. It still takes a lot of work and effort to put on, these different types of events. And Genevieve, my new colleague and LMPEI, she's handling us all very well here. So, but Adrian, it's a lovely book, and I think you and Penelope, who was the editor, did a fantastic job. And and I just hope you have more stories in you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and everybody, thanks to everybody, because they made it made me feel very relaxed. Yeah, everybody, there are a lot of good people out there.
Adrian, I just have one question. The Lions Club is where you are Thursday night?
Correct.
And I'm not quite sure, is it St. Rustico or?
Yeah, right across from St. Augustine's Church.
Is that kind of, before you go into Rustico, you go down that long road, and is that where, it's before you get to